He had a broken collarbone, 8 broken ribs, a crushed chest, a collapsed lung. His shirt had burnt almost completely off his body. One shoe was missing. He was bleeding from his nose, his mouth, and one ear. A few minutes earlier, he had been at 5,000 feet. Now he was lying on a lawn in Beverly Hills. The house behind him was on fire. His plane, the most advanced military spy aircraft in the world, a machine that he had designed himself, was in pieces across 3 properties. The doctors gave him a 50-50 chance of surviving the night. He survived. And then, and this is the part that's truly unbelievable, he called for his secretary. He had nearly died 20 minutes ago, and the first thing he asked for on that hospital gurney was his secretary, because there was work to be done. His name was Howard Hughes. And before I tell you everything else about him, and there's a lot more to tell, I need you to know about this moment. This specific moment on that Beverly Hills lawn. That is the hinge upon which his entire story turns. Before July 7, 1946, the most extraordinary man in America. After it, something stranger, something sadder, and more complicated. This is both of those stories. Welcome, I'm Arvind Vijay Mohan, and today we are about to discover a human being whose life story will stop you dead in your tracks for how inspiring, how fascinating, how impressive, and how tragic it was. It truly was. Howard Hughes. He was, depending on which decade you're looking at, a Hollywood filmmaker, a world record-breaking pilot, a military aircraft designer, a billionaire industrialist, and eventually one of the most famous recluses in modern history. And here's the thing that brought him to my attention for this particular episode. Stan Lee, the creator of Spider-Man, the Hulk, the Fantastic Four, once sat down and explained from where he got the idea for Iron Man, for Tony Stark. And what he said was this: I had only Howard Hughes in my mind. Iron Man was Howard Hughes. I want to show you why that description is not an exaggeration, not even a little bit. Houston, Texas, Christmas Eve. Howard Robert Hughes Jr. is born into money. His father, Howard Sr., is an inventor who has just patented a revolutionary drill bit that can cut through rocks in ways that no tool ever has done before. Oil companies line up to rent it. The money is substantial, then significant, then extraordinary. But the father's on the road constantly chasing that oil business. And so the boy grows up primarily with his mother, Ellen, who has one overriding relentless fear: germs. She checks his body for signs of illness with the thoroughness of a doctor. She pulls him from school at the first rumor of an epidemic. She catalogs every cough, every sneeze, every flushed cheek. The boy internalizes all of it. The world his mother teaches him is a place of invisible dangers. You must control whatever you can. You must manage every variable. He does not spend his childhood being anxious exactly. He spends it being precise. At 11, he builds Houston's first wireless radio transmitter. At 12, when his mother refuses to buy him a motorcycle, he motorizes his own bicycle using a car starter and batteries. He's not a child. He's like a small engineer. Then the world collapses around him, one parent at a time. His mother dies in 1922. His father follows in 1924. Howard is still a teen when they both leave him, alone, all by himself. Within 2 years, he has lost both parents and inherited the most valuable drill bit on the planet, and the hundreds of millions that accompany it. He does 2 things with that inheritance that will define the next 3 decades of his life. First, he moves to Hollywood and he learns to fly. Let's talk about the Hollywood part first, because what he does there is, by any measure, insane, but in a magnificent way. He signs on a talented director, Louis Milestone, to a 3-year contract. Their debut picture, 2 Arabian Nights, wins an Academy Award in 1927. But Hughes isn't satisfied with just making successful films. He wants to make the film that no one else would dare dream to attempt. He decides to make a film called Hell's Angels, a story about British pilots in the First World War, told with real aircraft, real aerial stunts, real danger. He acquires 87 World War I airplanes. 1987. He hires ace pilots. He takes flying lessons himself and obtains a pilot's license. He crashes. He injures his face. But he keeps going. When talking pictures arrive finally and make his silent film obsolete, he doesn't scrap the project. He simply reshoots it as a talkie, replacing his lead actress in the process.
See you again, Helen. It's been 4 whole days.
Really?
Have you been over long?
And when it is finally released in 1930, it has cost nearly $4 million. The most expensive film made to that date. One critic calls the aerial sequences incomparably the greatest air spectacle ever projected. Hughes is 24 years old. And there is another thing developing around this same time. Something that will follow him for the rest of his life. Women are drawn to him almost immediately, instinctively. Not just because he's rich, though he is enormously rich, but because he radiates something rarer. Focus, danger, velocity. The sense that he's moving towards the future faster than everyone else around him. Howard Hughes becomes, over the next 2 decades, the single most glamorous bachelor in all of America. Actresses, socialites, film stars, they orbit around him constantly. Miss Katharine Hepburn, Miss Ava Gardner, Miss Jean Harlow, Miss Jean Tierney, Miss Rita Hayworth. Women who are not merely famous but defining figures of Hollywood itself. And what is striking is that many of them genuinely loved him. Genuinely. Miss Katharine Hepburn once defended him fiercely against the press, admiring the brilliance and discipline beneath all that spectacle. Miss Ava Gardner, long after their romance had ended, would still take his calls in the middle of the night. Because beneath the control, beneath the ego, beneath the myth of Howard Hughes, there was also vulnerability and almost childlike loneliness. The same intensity that made him a genius made intimacy difficult. He wanted closeness but also control, admiration but also privacy, connection without surrender. And for a time, in the golden years before the crash, his romances became part of the American legend that was surrounding him. Not separate from the myth, but essential to it. Because Howard Hughes did not merely live like Tony Stark. He pioneered the very template, the brilliant inventor, the billionaire, the aviator, the public spectacle surrounded by movie stars and impossible glamour. A man the entire world watched with fascination even before it watched him fall. Here is the thing about Howard Hughes that is almost impossible to convey. He did not have just one extraordinary chapter. He has about 7 of them, each running simultaneously. While he is making Hell's Angels, he's also learning to be a pilot. By 1932, he's learning to be an aircraft engineer. By 1935, he has designed, built, and personally test-flown the most advanced racing plane in the world, the Hughes H-1 Racer. On September 13, 1935, Hughes, flying the H-1, sets the airspeed record of 352 miles per hour near Santa Ana, California. The previous record was 314 miles per hour. He then redesigns the plane entirely. On January 19, 1937, he sets a new transcontinental airspeed record, flying non-stop from Los Angeles to New York in 7 hours, 28 minutes and 25 seconds. He then turns his attention to something even larger, if you'd believe it. In 1938, he circumnavigates the globe in 91 hours, flying a modified Lockheed Super Electra with a 4-man crew. He had cut the previous record in half. New York welcomed him with parades. He receives the Congressional Gold Medal. He wins the Harmon Trophy twice. He's hosted at the White House. He is without question the most famous private citizen in America. And in his spare time, the moments between record flights and film productions, he's exhibiting signs of something else. The counting, the rituals, the obsessive repetition of words and actions, the terror of contamination, the hand washing that goes on and on and on until his skin is raw. What we would now recognize as severe OCD. At this point, it is manageable, controlled, or at least hidden. And then comes the plane. July 7th. Hughes takes off from the Hughes Aircraft Factory airfield in Culver City on the maiden flight of the XF-11, the most advanced military spy plane ever built. He has personally designed it. Despite an agreed testing program, Hughes stays airborne for nearly twice the approved duration. He's flying alone, all by himself. He's 5,000 feet up when an oil leak causes one of the counter-rotating propellers to reverse pitch. The plane begins to yaw uncontrollably to the right. He starts to lose altitude. Hughes tries to crash it on the Los Angeles County Club golf course. He doesn't make it. The plane descends into a Beverly Hills neighborhood, destroying 3 homes. Marine Sergeant William Lloyd Duncan and Captain James Guston witness the crash from a nearby house and they rush to the wreckage. They manage to pull Hughes out in the nick of time. He's bleeding from his ears, his nose, and his mouth. His shirt is burnt off his body completely. One shoe of his is missing. He kept saying, "Let me up, lay me down." At the hospital, a crushed collarbone, broken ribs, a collapsed lung. Physicians give him roughly a 50-50 chance of survival. He survives. He flies again 8 months later, but the morphine prescribed to manage his injuries begin a dependency that will eventually consume him. The mustache that he grows in the aftermath is there to conceal burn scars from the crash that never go away. He wears a mustache for the rest of his life. The man who lands in that Beverly Hills garden is not quite the same man who took off from Culver City. The last 26 years of Howard Hughes' life are not easy to watch. He retreats, first from public life, then from most human contact. He lives in hotel rooms with blacked out windows. He goes days without sleep, then sleeps for days. His OCD, once the engine of his perfectionism, becomes a prison. He weighs 90 pounds when he dies, on the 5th of April 1976, aboard an aircraft, of all places. An emergency medical flight from Acapulco back to his childhood home of Houston. He dies on a plane. His final years are a complete tragedy. They cannot be dressed up. But here is also what is true. When Stan Lee sits down in 1963 to create a new kind of superhero, a billionaire industrialist, a charismatic bachelor constantly linked to the most famous women in the world, a weapons manufacturer, a man of enormous talent and enormous ego, a genius who simply cannot stop building things, he reaches almost instinctively for Howard Hughes. The fictional Tony Stark inherits his fortune as a young man. So did Hughes. Tony Stark testifies before a Senate committee about his weapons program. So did Hughes in 1947 in the highly publicized hearings about war profiteering and the Spruce Goose. Tony Stark is obsessed with control, with perfection, with building things that have never existed before, with testing them himself, whatever the personal cost. Lee put it this way: he was an inventor, an adventurer, a billionaire, a ladies' man, and finally a nutcase. Without being crazy, Iron Man was Howard Hughes. The superhero, in other words, is Hughes with the tragedy removed. Hughes as he might have been if the plane had not crashed, if the morphine had not come, if the OCD had remained manageable somehow. Tony Stark gets to be the best version of what Howard Hughes once was. Hughes does not. The Howard Hughes Medical Institute, which he established, continues to fund scientific research across America. It has supported Nobel Prize-winning discoveries. It operates to this day. The man is gone, but his money keeps building things. He would have approved of that, I think, much like Tony Stark would have. You know, in the moments after the crash, while he's on a hospital gurney and he's been given a 50-50 chance of surviving, he has broken bones in his body that you might not even believe possible. And while he's lying there, his mind is occupied with how uncomfortable the bed that he's been laid on is. So he has his secretary assemble a team of engineers from Hughes Aircraft to take notes on how he wants that bed redesigned. Upon those notes, they created a customized motorized bed with 6 adjustable sections, push-button controls, and features that were intended to reduce the agony caused by his burns and broken bones. That redesigned hospital bed prototype is what you would find in nearly every major hospital around the globe to this day. Even while he recovered in that hospital, he continued to display the compulsive behavior of a man who could not stop working, could not rest, could not let go of control even for a moment. There are people in this world for whom the work is not a distraction from life. It is life itself. The making, the building, the designing of that thing that has never existed before, except for in their mind. that is where they live. That is where they feel most fully themselves. Hughes was one of those people. He built the fastest plane on earth and then personally got in it and flew it up until it broke. That is not the behavior of a sensible person. It is, however, the behavior of someone who challenged and changed the world. Now, I'm not telling you to be reckless. I'm not telling you that obsession is some sort of a virtue to celebrate. I'm saying, look at what a human being can accomplish when they decide at some fundamental level that the thing that they're building matters more than their own comfort. And then ask yourself what you're building. Howard Hughes was real. That crash was real. The inspiration for Iron Man was real. These are real people. These are real stories. And all of this really happened. My name is Arvind Vijay Mohan, and I'll see you on the next mind-blowing episode.